Hey class, so today you're going to be doing something kind of interesting with rubbings, which are also have fancy names associated with them. Um, I posted a web address about Max Ernst and how he kind of brought it into Dada. Let's be honest, he didn't really invent rubbings. Like, people have been doing them for a really long time as a way to get information. For example, the Rosetta Stone, long before they had rubbings of it to try to crack the code, etc., etc. But what he did do is bring it into the world of fine art a little bit more, and in an art movement called Dada. So I'm going to show you the kind of materials you're going to want to use for this. Your kneaded eraser. You may or may not want to use some fixative. It's on the supply list. If you don't have it, it's not necessary, but there's workable ones. They usually say workable on there. Those ones work better for what we're doing because you may want to use it in layers. Probably going to want to use some charcoal pencils like we've been using. You may want to use a X-Acto knife for some stuff I'll show you. And you could possibly still want to use your regular white erasers or pink erasers. Definitely probably want to use one of these or a piece of paper towel or something rolled. You're going to want your compressed charcoal. There may be parts of it that you choose that you would use pencil for, and optionally you can use ink for certain things, but it's not really necessary. The main thing is going to be about creating texture. I'm looking in my supply box here. And then using that as the base of your cave, okay? So let me show you how. I didn't bring home, unfortunately, newsprint, which is unfortunate because I want you guys to use newsprint to test out textures. But what I did bring home that will work similarly enough is really thin, see how thin it is, white drawing paper that I can use as an example. So I'm going to show you about it using this. You're going to want to do your final on your white 18 by 24 drawing paper in 3 drawings. So it's a decent amount of time you're going to spend on this, which you have a couple weeks left in class, so it's totally appropriate amount compared to class time. And homework time is just you're going to want to stay focused on it. And it's going to be interesting because, like in the slideshow I showed you, you have a chance to really be a little more creative in the sense of you're not just looking at a still life in front of you and measuring it and drawing it, but kind of getting to invent some stuff, so that's cool. But let me pause it here for a second and switch the camera angle so you can see what I'm doing here. You're going to have a big piece of paper, and you're going to want to do some tests of textures to get the idea with your cheaper newsprint / thinner paper. You have this giant piece of paper. Well, you don't want to use one whole giant sheet on each texture, so what I recommend doing is tearing down the sheets of paper a little bit. You can cut them with scissors, but good way to kind of learn how to do a few things as well. And you would do this, I want to teach you something. You would do it with not newsprint. You would do it with printmaking paper if you're doing printmaking, which is tear the paper actually. So this is 11 by 14 paper, smaller already. Probably don't need to tear it because very much, but you have a big piece of paper like 18 by 24 piece of newsprint. You don't want to use all of it. You want to maybe get it into fourths or something. You don't have to be exacting about it, but I'm showing you how you could be. So if you're going to tear paper, you measure from the edge over to make it square, and then you put your ruler really firmly. So I'm holding the ruler really firmly down, and then take the top edge, making sure you're holding all the way up. And then as you go down, you scoot your hands along to keep at the edge of the paper. Just a way to do it really cleanly. The main thing is making sure you get enough pressure and you keep your hand where you're tearing like at the same point as where the tear is happening. So if you keep pulling from up here and the tear is way down here, you'll rip your paper up here. So you want to keep them at the same level as you do it. So you get a couple of sheets of that, maybe about 4 or 5 at least. Four will do your test pretty good, maybe 8 if you really get into it, because you want to get some different tests. And then you're going to take them in different locations, outside, inside. Think about anything that has texture around you. This is a smooth desk. That's not going to work, right? But you could use something very basic, like a keyboard. It's almost like I planned it or something. Or you could use wall texture. If you're like me and around you have some rocks outside, you could do that. Your wood table, grates, sewer drains, all kinds of the road. Don't get hit by any vehicles, so don't stand out in the middle of the road. Sidewalk, you know, be safe, but all kinds of things you could do it on that are pretty interesting. But I'm just going to show you a couple. My video camera that I'm using to record mostly is on a tripod connected to my computer, so I can't really walk around everywhere outside. But I'll do a few things inside here. So when you do this, I'm going to do the keyboard first. You want to hold your paper on and not move it as you go. So you want to have your hands on it. You want to use the side of the charcoal, and you want to get it kind of even. If you want to pay attention to the direction of your stroke, so I'm going to kind of try to do it in one direction. If I go a lot of different directions, it'll start to look kind of funny. And you could think about this in terms of, remember when I made you tone your paper? You are thinking about that right now. For the assignment where we raced out, right? We erased out the tone on the paper, but the first step was to get it all kind of covered with charcoal. And then after that, to blend it, right? Well, you're not going to blend it this time, but it has a similar type of idea behind it, that you're toning the whole paper, and you're going to use this toned paper with a texture on it as well. So you're adding an additional element of texture to it, right? And that is going to become that will become the basic drawing surface, the starting point of your cave. So actually liking the keyboard quite a bit. To do it well though, I'd have to kind of keep the pattern going over the whole surface. So what I would do, I don't want to get charcoal on my keyboard, so I put another piece of paper to block out the top and make sure it's not getting it on there. And then I'm going to just add a little bit more. So you want the whole edge. Some of the distant examples I showed you, they're not as good because they didn't work all the way up to the edge. So you want the texture to cover the whole surface is my point. See how if it's not quite big enough, you can kind of shift it around and work with it. Either way, depending on how it is, you don't want there to be this big white spot all the way around the edge. That's going to look funny. So if you can't get it perfectly to the edge, at least make sure it's not bright white when you're doing your final. Okay, so that would be an interesting start to something for the cave. You have like a lot of really cool kind of grid-like lines on there. Now, got dust all over my keyboard. That's annoying. Okay. Now, after you get that, you're going to just put it aside for a minute and do a lot of tests. Let me show you kind of how it looks on the wall. So I'm going to pause it for 1 second here. Get set up. Just a little disclaimer on this. You're going to want to be real careful if you do something on your own wall inside. I honestly probably don't recommend it because you're going to get charcoal all over it and you're going to piss off your roommates, parents, landlord, self if it's your house. So I just want to, I don't have a lot of options though, so I just want to show you this. And I want to show you that I'm not going to go all the way to the edge because I really don't want it on my wall. That's why I don't recommend your wall. You're better off doing something where you can get it close to the edge. So maybe something outside or a table or floor is better. Okay? Because this stuff will get everywhere really quickly. And it definitely gets pretty sticky. Not sticky. But it does get onto everything. It's not like, you know how it is. It's not sticky like honey, but it does stick to so many things. So let's look at this. This is a surface you're going to use for your cave. Question is, do you have to have the same background on every part of the cave? No, not necessarily. Because you have 3 drawings. Do all of them have to have the same background? No, they don't. Could it possibly be wise to have them all? Yes, so it unifies it together, but not necessary. Can you add more texture to it once you have the cave set up? Absolutely you can. So, say you have this, and you're like, I like this and I like that. Can I cross the paper over and kind of mess with it and get both on there? Yes, you can. So, that's an option. Can I add more texture to it after I've already done it? Yes, you can. You're just going to have to do a little bit of experimenting, and that's why I want you to do stuff with your newsprint before you do your final. Look what I'm doing. So I have the wall texture, and I'm like, I want something else. So I just put a regular old cell phone charging cord under there and kept building it up a little bit. What else could you use for this? Spaghetti, cardboard. You could use sand if glued down on something, sandpaper. You could do rocks outside, leaves, all grasses, tree bark, all sorts of things, because you can wrap paper onto all kinds of things. The siding on your house, again, a deck. Be careful not to get the charcoal everywhere, but there's a lot of options available to you. Okay? Now, once you have these sheets, you can mess with them. You kind of get to decide your drawing, what you're going to draw, what's important to you on your cave wall. And you can mess with them quite a lot. And do a lot of stuff to make them interesting and fun before you even add any drawings. But I'm just going to show you right now how I would say, for example, I've been thinking about my cave wall, and I'm a big baseball fan. I really like the San Francisco Giants. So I may put onto one of mine something like, if I had part of my fun things I want to do on something I care about, I may set up my Giants hat in some way, like hanging on my monitor. And I would pick a texture background. Maybe I do the same one for all 3, honestly. It'd be easier in a certain way to unify them, but I can mess with them afterwards. How do I mess with them, and what do I put on there? Well, these are where you can bring in some of the other drawing tools that you've been using for when you've been toning paper and erasing out. So you could use these kneaded erasers like you were doing when you were erasing out your drawings. More charcoal on there. The tortillins to blend, right? And pencil to block things out or really clarify things if you wanted to a little bit. So let's just say I have this here, and I'm liking this one, so I'm going to use it to kind of start drawing my San Francisco Giants hat, and I'm going to put it hanging on the screen. Now, I'm gonna do it hanging. I'm gonna show part of the screen too because I think for me right now I want to communicate the idea that this baseball season has been somewhat canceled. So I'm measuring my screen, and the Giants hat is basically the same, almost the same length as the screen, and it's about 3 wide to 2 high. So if I do that, you're gonna do the same measuring. That should be the height. Okay. I'm blocking that out just carefully. Probably would maybe use a pencil for this. And this is just me I've been thinking about this, I've done some sketches about it. So I'm not just freestyling it here. You want to do planning sketches, so you're going to take, and these right here, these test sheets could be some of your planning sketches. So like I'm trying this out. I'm not sure if I like it. I've done some little designs, but I might not like it. So this is on my test sheet, but I want to this would be like a rough draft to try something. So now I'm going to go through and start to add that on there. I'm going to measure it. It goes almost the same, but it only barely goes over a little bit. Maybe I can show you. See, it's on there. Forgive the camera shake. Have it hanging up. Do I have to do it on the screen? No. I'm starting to think maybe that will be a mistake because it won't read very well. So maybe I'd put it on a hook on the wall or something instead. But I'm going to try it anyway. So I have my hat. I got it sort of set up here. I know it's about right here. So I'm going to do an intuitive gesture of it. Kind of going like that. I know that this kind of shows where the back of the hat is going right there, showing a little bit of the corner. So, I'm doing an intuitive gesture here real quick. The SF's going to be about right here. The bill is hitting on the edge and disappearing. So I got something in here. Okay. And I'm going to take in and go in and actually do some more careful measuring here real quick. So I'm going to go, okay, the width of the whole thing is about from here to the SF should be the width. So I got it a little bit narrow, so I need to add more width over here. And now I'm going to kind of take and carefully begin to really draw with my charcoal, like do a contour edge carefully. Start to really get the detail. Okay. And this is going to be small. I'm realizing as I'm doing this right now, my rough draft, this is feeling really small to try to get all the details. That's why I want you to use the bigger sheet of paper, because you have more chance to do a lot of details. Now, also, as I'm doing this, I'm realizing that I have my 2 sheets portrait, right? And I said to you in the lecture and things, you're going to have 3. A triptych means 3 drawings. You do not want to, and I do not want you to have one of them landscape, one of them portrait, another one portrait, mixed stuff. They all need to be, all 3 drawings need to be going the same way. So if you pick the same way, so if you pick portrait, longer up and down, then you need to do all of them portrait. And if you pick landscape, then you need them all to be landscape. Well, think about what you pick, because it's not just automatic, okay, I'll pick portrait, why not? This one is kind of things I like, so it's sort of a portrait of me. Then I have to do portraits of other things. Well, do I want to make all 3 of them about me? I could do. That's a little self-focused. Maybe I can make them about my family, a portrait of my community in some way, the community I care about, things I care about, things I invest in, Merced College, my faith, all these type of things that you have that matter to you. You could make them as part of your portrait. So you want to think about it. If it's landscape, Then it has a reference to the environment around you, what you see. That could be portraying things that you're feeling about COVID-19, the beautiful view out your window, disconnection, the way the literal landscape makes you feel, still life, all different type of things. So you can still do a landscape with a portrait and yourself in the environment or someone else too. So, it doesn't mean you can't do portraits on it. It just changes the sort of feeling to it, right? So this is my rough draft. I'm going to keep going here. I'm carefully just drawing the contour softly because I want to be able to possibly add some values to it. But actually, like I said, this can be a little bit more, in quotes, stylistic, but I don't want it to get too stylized. It has to be kind of natural. But there's some kind of level of possible change of creativity in this. And so, if you want some of them to be like more pure line drawings, that's okay. The little button of the hat. I need to measure that and see how much it is. It's about 2/3 of this, so I got it too big. So I'm going to come in there and change that. This is the problem of trying to draw too small. That's why I always tell you guys to draw bigger, because you have a chance to really add details in. So I'm getting that hat going, and one thing I'm also realizing in this hat is that I'm having an issue already with the fact that this is going to be a black and orange hat on a lot of black, so I'm going to have to think about how I portray it. And the lettering is going to be really challenging on this, and if I get it right, it'll be really interesting because it actually kind of gets all flowy and it's right over here. So you get the idea of what's happening here, right? I don't want to be Bob Ross, and although he's a nice guy and everything, draw forever on screen with you guys because it kind of gets a little bit tedious for you to watch, but here you go nonetheless. There's that, and then I'm realizing it'd be really nice to do the stitching, a little bit of line work for that. So this is me just trying to figure out, I'm going to count how many stitches, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I'm going to figure out how I want to do. And for this small of a drawing, I'm realizing I'm really going to have to do pencil to be able to pull this off, because it's a finer line. And I'm looking at that thing and seeing the little variations that are happening. Okay, so that's 3 of those. So I can get in here and really get the details. And I think for this size and scale, I'm okay with a little more stylization until I get to the point where I'm doing bigger and I can get more detail. But what I'm going to show you now is see how I want the hat to stand out from the background a little bit more. So I'm going to take and do some erasing with my kneaded eraser, okay, and get some of the texture off there. And I have this kind of emerge from the cave in a different way. And I was freestyling a little with my textures, so I'm realizing I created a little bit of my problem for myself in that this cord got into a zone where it's really dark, where I would prefer it not to have been. So this is why I'm doing some rough drafts, because it gives me a chance to come back in and change it next time. Now, it's kind of getting interesting. I'm starting to see how I can tie this into the cave wall, and it feels part of the environment a little bit more. So there's the hats developing on the screen over here. It's not showing up a lot yet because I have to keep shading it and adding more detail. But I'm also I had said I want to show the screen kind of blank because the baseball season got canceled this year so far. So, I can go in here and I'm going to look at that. and kind of begin to do some measuring on that too. Long strokes. Got the screen there. It's pretty square, but not perfect, so I'm going to do long stroke. Over the edge changes right there. I may or may not put the detail of the name of it. I'm kind of doing, I think I'm going to stylize this one a little bit more. But I do want to do some of the things like the size of, do some of the things like the stand. I think that'll be nice. 2, 5. So a fifth of this is the stand. 1, 2, 3. So it's about that big. I'm going to box it out a little bit, and it goes about halfway. So as it goes between here and here. That's that. And then back behind it, I can see is measuring the space. The stand at the bottom is about the same size, so I do that. Like that to there. And I'm just blocking it out like I would with any measuring drawing. I'm going to kind of get in that box that it's in accurately and do a little intuitive gesture. That's what I'm doing. So I can come back later and as I go, clean it up. Now I'm just kind of going through and cleaning it up based on observational drawing. And I got something going on right here. Goes further forward than I thought, so I'm going to check my measurements again. Oh, yep, it goes, this part goes all the way up to there. So it was blocked out by the keyboard, so I gotta adjust that. So this is my rough draft, right? Not my final. So I can kind of be a little bit looser with it. Get the idea of how it looks around. See if I even like it before I spend forever observational drawing it. And I'm starting to think that's kind of interesting. Because I have going on here the computer. Can you see that? It's not super strong. This is going to be the computer stand right here. I'm going to fill it in black and cover over the texture, or at least like shade it pretty strongly. I'm not going to make all of it exactly fully black, otherwise it'll look like a silhouette. So I'm going to kind of shade it though strongly. This part's more in shadow, so that'll be nice. And I'm going to make the screen, I thought about this when I was planning it out and thinking and drawing, that I'm actually going to make this completely white, like as if I scrape, as if I was in the cave drawing and I had decided to scrape off, and they did this back then, some of the wall patina and make it like a white scraping part. So this will show the lack of baseball season. Why am I doing this? Because I want the hat to stand out better too, and I want to kind of make something pop out of the cave so it's like it's not there. Now I'm not able to get all the texture off, which is okay because it's like I'm drawing in a cave, but I can do something that I wanted to show you. Use a X-Acto knife and pull it off carefully. I'm using the side of the blade. Don't be careful with your fingers if you do this, please. You don't really want to get your hand, you don't want to cut towards your finger, move it towards your finger. You want to go away from it, or if you pull it towards yourself, make sure your hand's not in the way and you don't go too hard. See how it's getting off a little bit of it? This is a way to, if you really wanted to also bring a highlight back in on something, like my hat has a bright spot right here. I could go down on, really go down to the actual white paper. It's hard to show you. will it show? I'm scraping down to the white paper in spots. I'm going to show it to you on this one. Maybe it'll show it better. I can create line work by, I have to be real careful. I'm doing a really light touch and kind of hitting it multiple times. See how I'm creating that line there? But I'm not going all the way through the paper. There's no hole, but that's the carefulness. You want to test that out on the extra piece. So I'm liking how this is going here. It's looking interesting because there's the hat and the computer screen will start popping out. And this is a rough draft. So I'm kind of just fill it in real quick to have a look at how it's looking. And I'm liking how the screen is going to pop out white. And I did careful looking at this and get the right shape. So it's going to pop out white screen and black monitor edge. So it's going to kind of frame some empty space on the picture, which will be really interesting. Now, at this point, I also could go, if you have white charcoal with your drawing kits, which a lot of you will, I'm going to find it in my kit real quick and I'm going to show you what it would look like if I put it on here. So I'm going to pause it for a second. I have white charcoal, or you also something like Contacran, which is another thing. This is Contacran. You can actually come in and mess with the space a little bit. So it's hard to see on the camera, but I'm putting it right here and over there. I'll add more of it and you'll be able to see as I go. It's going to make it whiter and pop out. It's subtle, but it really will make it grayer and whiter, like a screen light showing. And as part of this, I could also really get aggressive with my erasing first beforehand. And really make sure I'm getting as much off as possible, which I should do before I add white. But you're going to have a kind of interesting thing you're pushing and pulling against, which is the fact that I made you tone your paper and texture your paper beforehand. So it's part of the feeling of it. You don't want to, you push against it and pull it and change it, but it's going to be there. So you want it to be an element that you're using intentionally, and that's why I say pick your textures by testing some stuff out and thinking and doing some planning sketches before, like I was doing with this idea. And then you want to do some rough drafts maybe of things like I did with this. I'm spending a decent amount of time on it to show you, but also I would do that in general anyway, spend a decent amount of time on rough drafts to get the idea across and see if I like what's happening before I actually go to my final, because I'm going to be spending quite a bit of time on the final and I want to make sure I actually like it. So this is a rough draft, so a smaller scale but still the same idea. And I'm actually, as I'm seeing it blanked out, I'm actually really liking that because I feel like this is kind of communicating something about me. I like baseball, and the screen is blank. I can't watch it right now. But also it's talking something about what's happening in the world of COVID-19, because we're all kind of stuck on our screens more for things like work and school and stuff like that. So I like the double meaning that's happening out of this. And this is all using observation, right? So there's sometimes an idea that people have going on where they think that observational drawing doesn't allow you to create be creative. You just have to look and put, as people say in different parts of the world, you just look and put what you see down on paper only, and there's an idea sometimes that's like, oh, that's not creative, that's just whatever. But this is kind of proof positive to you that the way you look and put, to use that phrase from Australians. I listen to some Australian podcasts about art. I like one called Talking with Painters if you're into podcasts. Anyway, the way you look and put, the way you sight and see and measure what you do with it, even if it's strongly observational, like looking pretty realistic or naturalistic, for sure. What you decide as your subject matter, the direction of the paper or canvas or whatever you're working with ultimately, and how you arrange it as a design. Is it like interacting and with what kind of textures, how the different objects interact? Do you keep the same, feeling to everything, scale, all this type of stuff, even portraits, which are purely meant to be like sold, what you put with the person, like we've been discovering by your own portraiture that you did of yourself, where you put the person can really have a big effect. So I'm doing a rough draft, so I don't want you guys to think, oh, just be messy with it. I'm just trying to get the idea across here with a rough draft. When I'm doing my final, I would be way more careful on the angles, like this angle's off. So that's a baseball hat on the screen. Taking up a lot of the page, very central. The proportion of this page to an 18 by 24 isn't perfectly right. 7 to 11. So this is an important idea for you to realize. 18 by 24. You're going to be working on the 18 by 24 page, right? 18 inches, 24 inches. Now, if you divide 6 into 18, you get 3. Divide 6 into 24, you get 4, right? Trying to write backwards. So 3 to 4. 3 to 4 is the ratio. So if you're going to plan some rough drafts, even thumbnails, I recommend working at a 3 to 4 ratio. What does that mean? It means you can work 3 to 4. If you're little thumbnails, if you wanted, you could draw roughly 3 to 4 inch box. Fairly carefully, but don't have to be perfect for any of your thumbnails. Why would you do that? Well, because then when you design anything in here, it'll feel the same on the big piece of paper, okay? When you get in rough draft, I recommend maybe 6 to 8. So if I would have been working on 6 inches by 8 inches, I meant to tell you this, but I forgot. That's 6 by 8 inches, this space here. If I design on that kind of space, then when I put it on the big sheet of paper, it'll look the same. It'll feel like the same proportions. It'll feel like the space I considered, the edge, how big things were in the space, the negative space around the image, all of those things will have the same feeling as the small little design because I worked on the same scale, right? This is sort of an idea that takes off from what you've been learning about proportional measuring, and it kind of fits in a lot into the world of design and a bunch of other things like scale models for sculpture, public art projects. If you design something in a proportion to a scale, in a 3D object, then we go to make it bigger or smaller, it'll still have the same sort of feeling to it, right? So that's 8 inches there between those, and 6 inches, I'm going to have to think about where I would want the 6 inches to be. I kind of want it to be over this direction so the hat shows up more. So that means what I've ended up doing is my design is not going to work super well when I go to the 18 by 24 paper, because why not? I'm going to be cutting off part of the monitor, which maybe is okay, but I would have preferred it if I would have thought to tell you, which I meant to tell you in my notes, to start on a piece of paper with your rough draft. That is, this is for the rough draft. You don't need to worry about this for the rubbings, by the way. For your rough draft, draw a square on your paper that's the same proportion. So, you know, I forgot to do that and tell you guys that, so learn from my lecture mistake here. But I'm going to fix it right now to show you what I mean. I'm tearing it off to make it more dramatic so you know what I'm talking about. So you can kind of get the idea. So you remember me tearing it, and you remember, okay, make it the right size so I don't have to tear it later and mess up my idea too much. You wouldn't have to tear it, but I more mean that you don't have to change your idea dramatically because you didn't have it on the right size of paper. It wouldn't be changing the idea. What it would be doing, actually, idea is the wrong word. It would be changing your composition a lot, because this proves to you right here. You saw the composition before on a much larger piece of paper. That was bigger, yes, so I'm cropping it, but also a different proportion. It was 11 by, I think it was 7 by 11, which is a totally different proportion. The number 7 and 11 in a fraction would make a different proportional number than 3 to 4. So if I would have been designing in this scale of 3 to 4, which this is 6 inches by 8 inches, so I've multiplied 3 by 2 to get 6 and 4 by 2 to get 8, then I would have been designing it within the same proportional space, the same ratio. They do this with design a lot, like comics pages. You get a comic printed inside of a newspaper or something. It's like, you know, this big, maybe a little bit bigger, depending on Sunday Comic or something. Well, they make it much bigger space. If you see like Charles Schultz's original drawings for Peanuts, they're a lot bigger. How does it work reproduction wise? It works because the bigger scale object, the comic, is to the same scale, the same ratio, 2 to 3 or 3 to 4, whatever it is, so that when it's going from 9 by 12, just as an example, that's not actually what he does, that would be 3 to 4. He drew, if it's going down to 3 inches by 4 inches or 6 by 8, then you could design it 9 by 12, 18 by 24. When they photograph it or scan it and then print it, they can scale it down and it will still feel accurate. It's like when you use Photoshop, you push the shift button so that when it expands and contracts your images or the thing you drew, Photoshop or Illustrator, it doesn't change the feeling of it. Otherwise, you get a stretching out. It's the same in analog space, the actual drawn space. If you design at the same scale ratio, when you do your rough drafts and you scale it up, it won't change it so dramatically, right? So you're going to want to do that and think about that, especially when you get to the rough draft stage. When you're in the thumbnail stages and quick little things, you don't need to worry so much about that, because it's more about getting your ideas down, whereas this is about figuring out the composition, the space, the way you want it to be. So, you know, this is still a rough draft, but you can see how I've got my cave texture, the wall, I'm playing with observation, something I care about, the Giants. Playing with the idea of the blankness of no games being shown and COVID-19 screens. I might put a screensaver on here. Maybe that would be interesting. Like I'm saving the place in my life for it that's not there. I don't know. That's a little cheesy, but maybe just a blank screen works better. And its design element pretty interesting. Give a negative space relief from all this. I feel like it's a little big on the page now, but I like it maybe empty. I might put a coffee cup here or some other type of beverage or something because I like to, drink coffee. Maybe I would, who knows what else I could put here. I think this one's getting kind of like about fun things for me, so I might do a camera, pencil. That stuff gets a little cheesy art-wise, but there's things I could do. I like to try to keep it a little more uh, people kind of thinking and having to guess a little bit more about what it is. So maybe I add something else in the still life that feels natural to this, but also kind of twist it on its head a little bit. So you have a baseball hat on a monitor. That's interesting. Dialogue. What else could I put in the dialogue that I'm interested in? Hiking, going outdoors, woodworking. So maybe I put something that's a little different. Sculpture, ceramics. That's a little bit cheesy, but I have a couple mugs that I've made my own self on a pottery wheel. I might put a handmade mug here, which would do two things at once, like talk about how I like to drink tea, coffee, all these things, and then also I made something, so a handmade item. That could be really interesting. Kind of bringing two things together and also feel like a still life of someone at their desk working but wanting, not able to see things on the screen, maybe working, maybe waiting for something. So there's a lot of different kind of nuance that starts to happen in that. Okay, so this gives you the idea of what you're doing, cave wall textures, the type of drawing tools you're using, right? I didn't talk too much about the tortillins, but talked about that. The tortillin I could use for blending the shading on my hat and adding more to it when I go when I go to the actual full on version. I'm gonna want to do carefully measuring the wrinkles in it, and I would want to do some blending. So the tortillin would help me do that, and I would add more, value through my colored my charcoal pencil. When I'm working on a bigger scale, I also could use more of my compressed charcoal to darken things up and add value. And if I was doing this as my final at this stage, I probably would go outside, not inside. This stuff's pretty strong smelling and not good to breathe. I want to work far away from yourself, not breathing it in. And spray it down. You have to let it stay out there till the smell dissipates. It takes a while. So once I got a certain amount done, I might spray it and then let it completely dry and get less smelly. And then come and work on top of it so it's workable. It has a tooth still, but I'll make it so all of this won't move around. And then I can add more and more detail on top of it. So I like this. I'm okay with some of the texture showing through and the hat blending. And actually, it kind of makes it feel like that cave. But I want to kind of add a little bit more nuance to the. I'm totally going to be adding more nuance to the hat shading. It's really light up here because of the way the light source is. So I'm going to want to make this darker, keep that light. Definitely work through the difficulty of the SF. You're like, why bother? Well, because it's especially part of the identity of the team and the reason why I'm picking the hat. So I need that. And also it makes it look really more interesting visually. So that would take quite a lot of observation and drawing and refining that part of it. So I could add some pencil, but if you notice when I'm adding the pencil lines, this is even a pretty dark woodless pencil. I think it's like 4B or 6B. it doesn't show up nearly as well as the charcoal line. So, I'm going to have to, I can block things out with the pencil, but really for it to work on this, I'm going to have to really get that charcoal line in there. Otherwise it's not going to work very well. So, and, when I'm doing the SF, I'm really going to have to pay attention to how it curves on the surface. So I put a box around it, how it kind of goes away and curves on the surface and get it accurate, because lettering on the surface, like you've discovered, like surfaces of buildings, you end up with quite a bit of problems if you don't get it in perspective with the line and the points and then write it in that perspective. Same thing with lettering on a biomorphic or non-linear shape, same type of thing. This is not necessarily biomorphic, but a rounder shape. I say it's not biomorphic because it's not life, but it's not a linear, like square rectangular shape. It's more naturalistic, natural world type of shape with soft cloth and stuff. So same with patterns of cloth on paintings and stuff people do. That's pretty challenging because you have to have it follow the flow. So you're gonna get charcoal a lot of places. Maybe work on newspaper. I've been using some wet wipes to wipe up stuff, but it's not working super well. So that was a bad choice because it's just making it move around and get wet and soaked and dirty. So be careful where you get your charcoal. So, all right, class, this should get you going pretty deep into the process, and I hope you're doing well and staying safe out there. And definitely ask questions if you have them. Go out in the world and investigate, but keep social distancing. When you're doing this stuff, have a little fun with it. Maybe it'll help you take away some stress and having to be at home, make art, and have something to do instead of just watching TV and all the time. Give you a chance to go outside and take some texture, do some textures and stuff. So, all right, take care of yourselves. I'll see you. I won't see you in the semester, but I'll see you virtually before the end of the semester. Bye, guys.